It wasn't the most entertaining game of all time, but Notre Dame controlled Georgia Tech throughout on their way to a 31-13 win, and they did it by owning all three phases. Why a boring win like this is sometimes an important win, next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and thank you for joining me here on Sunday night, or maybe Monday morning, for some of you to talk about Notre Dame's 31-13 win over Georgia Tech. And if you are listening to it on Monday, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. As always, this show is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch every episode on YouTube. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you are watching along, or rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast if that's how you're tuning in today. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Notre Dame went into Atlanta, and they took care of business on Saturday against Georgia Tech. The Irish won by a final score of 31-13, and that score doesn't really do it justice because the Yellow Jackets scored a touchdown late in garbage time, potentially at the cost of their own backup quarterback, which is a little bit odd because Zach Pyron looked like he was very injured at the very end there, but Georgia Tech was able to get that touchdown late. Notre Dame still won. They still covered, and now they have a 5-game winning streak going into the Navy game. And look, this was not a complete game, nor was it the most exciting game. Like, I don't think I'm going to be telling my grandkids about the time that the Irish beat up on a depleted Georgia Tech team with their backup quarterback in an NFL stadium that was maybe 60% full. It really wasn't that kind of game, and that's okay, to be honest. It felt like I've seen this game a million times throughout my life, but most of those games happened during the Brian Kelly era where Notre Dame would go out there, they'd play an inferior team, they would be in full control for pretty much the entire game, but it wasn't always the most aesthetically pleasing football game that you've ever watched, but it doesn't really matter because Notre Dame won. They won by a lot, and under Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame has not had these types of performances on a consistent basis, and this is a team in Georgia Tech, especially under Brent Key, they have a history of playing the spoiler, so it was important for Notre Dame to go down there, take care of business, and leave with an easy win. And as far as I know, no more season-ending injuries. I mean, I guess we didn't think that Benjamin Morrison was going to be out for the end of the season after the game against Stanford, but knock on wood, so far so good. And that was a very important aspect of this game because Notre Dame has dealt with so many injuries already. They needed to get through this one without any more, especially with a Navy game coming up, which certainly has been prone to more injuries happening. So that was very important. Not a complete performance, but as I said in the cold open, Notre Dame won in all 3 phases of the game. And today I'm going to break down the performance in each phase and explain how it contributed to the win, but what they need to improve upon going forward. And let's start with the offense because I believe it was an up and down day for the Notre Dame offense. They had a 3-and-out to start the game and then immediately followed that up by a brutal interception by Riley Leonard. That was the bad Riley that we saw early on in the year. And yeah, I think Bo Collins gave up on the route a little bit there. Definitely should have kept running, but he probably was thinking, oh, I'm double covered. This play is dead. Oh my God, there's the ball. What do I do? And by that point, the Georgia Tech safety was already there to make a play. Just a really bad decision by Riley Leonard. And he said in the post game that they had ran that play in practice like 5 times throughout the week. They had a look that they liked, and it worked basically every single time in practice. But then when they went out there to run it in the game, Georgia Tech ran cover 3. That play was not meant to work against cover 3, but he decided to throw it anyway. He cannot do that, and that is a mistake that a senior quarterback should not be making, especially at this point in the season. But at least Riley Leonard recognized that in the postgame. Then Georgia Tech went down the field and scored a touchdown after that interception. And then I was thinking there, like, is this about to be a game? Like, it's 7-0. The Notre Dame offense is sputtering to start out. This is not really feeling that great in the moment. I wasn't super nervous, but I was more so annoyed. Then Notre Dame goes on a 75-yard drive that took up 8 minutes off the clock. They ran 14 plays. And then after they scored a touchdown on that drive, they followed that up with a 5-play, 68-yard drive that led to another touchdown. And then Notre Dame was up 14-7, and they never turned back. But what I really loved about those 2 drives specifically was the play calling and the design from Mike Denbrock. They had some nice runs in there, mixed in with some exotic screen plays that Georgia Tech just did not have an answer for. And credit to Riley Leonard for bouncing back after that interception because he was dealing. I believe at one point he completed 12 straight passes for nearly 150 passing yards. He was making plays. He was making some nice throws on the screenplays, which might not look that hard, but you have to be athletic and you have to be as big as he is, like to make some throws over top of the rushing defender. So I really liked what I saw on those two drives. And then coming out of the half, Notre Dame scored another touchdown that was set up by a great slot fade to Jaden Greathouse. Great pass, great catch by Greathouse there. And it was even better that they ran it on a first down because Notre Dame has not really been chucking the ball downfield very often on the first play of the drive. So this felt like a carryover from the bye week where Notre Dame came out against Stanford. They were breaking all these tendencies that they had from the beginning of the season. So you have these three drives back to back to back. Notre Dame scores a touchdown on all three. The Irish are up 21-7. The offense is cooking. And you're like, okay, this is a great opportunity for this offense to really put their foot on the gas. They could put up 40 points in this game and really continue to build off their performance from last week against Stanford. But then they hit a slog that lasted for pretty much the remainder of the game, and it felt all too familiar. After they scored a touchdown on 3 straight possessions, this is how they finished the game on offense. Punt, turnover on downs, a field goal. Now, granted, on this field goal drive, Jeremiah Love did score a touchdown, but it was wiped off by your weekly Anthony Knapp holding penalty on a critical play. I understand he's a true freshman, but this happens every single week now. And then Notre Dame missed a field goal after converting a fake field goal on that same drive, and that is the game. So there's multiple different ways to look at this performance on the offense. They showed some really encouraging signs on those 3 straight touchdown drives where you had everything working. They were passing the ball downfield. They were capitalizing on short plays, short pass plays that set up a bunch of yards after a catch, which was really encouraging. They were running the ball effectively as well. But that second half slog was frustrating, and it felt like a step back to where they were earlier on in this season. Not like a full step back. They weren't turning the ball over. Riley Leonard was still completing passes, and he wasn't just airmailing layups like he was against Miami, Ohio. But it felt like a missed opportunity. Riley Leonard resorted to some things that he had done earlier, like getting flush out of the pocket early, and there really weren't that many plays to be made downfield. The receivers weren't getting as much separation. They were getting stuffed in the run game. It just wasn't pretty. Now, credit to Georgia Tech, too. They bounced back. They made some second-half adjustments. They played hard, and they're well coached. Like, I like their defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci, used to coach under Mike Elko, so it's not a shock that they figured some things out on that side of the ball and were able to contain Notre Dame for a little bit in the second half. But Notre Dame had more talent than them, and like I said, this was a chance for them to really keep it going, to continue to improve, because they're going to need to improve on that side of the ball the rest of the way. And maybe this is just what you're going to get with the Notre Dame offense, where they aren't able to put together a 60-minute performance. Like, they're just going to have some drives where you're like, just scratching your head, like, what are you doing out there? But overall, I still think it was a good performance. Plenty of things to like in this one. Riley Leonard finished 20 of 29 passing, had 203 passing yards, but only 7 yards per attempt, which is pretty low. He did have 10 carries for 51 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns on the year, which is awesome. Jadarian Price had another good game. He was the leading rusher in this one with 8 carries, 69 yards, including 8.6 yards per carry. He was definitely his most efficient game running the football. Jeremiah Love was awesome, despite the fact there were some concerns about his health going into this one. He has an undisclosed injury. There were even some reports that he might be out in this one. His rushing props were pulled off a lot of sports books, so there was some uncertainty. He went through an abbreviated warm-up, but man, did he look like he was ready to go, because not only was he making plays with the ball in his hands, he finished with 93 total yards and a touchdown that should have been 2 because of the touchdown I mentioned earlier that got wiped off by the penalty. But he is really getting dirty in the run block game. Like, he is the lead blocker for a lot of Riley Leonard's big counter runs. And there was this one play on the Riley Leonard touchdown run where Jeremiah Love just absolutely lit up a Georgia Tech defender, got up and let him know about it too. The fact that your arguably best player on offense is making plays like that as a blocker really tells you a lot about Jeremiah Love, just as a player and as a person. So the fact that they have Jeremiah Love for one more year is just so huge, because he is such a talented player. He has a level that Notre Dame running backs have not had in a long time. Like, sure, Audric Estimé was a great running back. Kyron Williams is a great running back. But there are things that Jeremiah Love can do with the ball where it's just show-stopping. Like, when he got that fake punt and he was running out to the right, he slows down his run, basically baiting the defender to come at him and really dive. And then he just does like a really subtle juke. The defender goes flying. And it's just little plays like that. We're like, man, Jeremiah Love, the game is just slow to him compared to everyone else. So really great game by him. I thought Bo Collins and Jaden Greathouse were getting more involved in the passing game. I already mentioned Jaden Greathouse's catch on the slot fade. And then Mitchell Evans played 51 snaps, which is really important. That's his most on the year. He didn't really have a great game statistically, only had 4 catches for 26 yards, but Notre Dame was going to him a lot more in the passing game, which is good because he was basically a no-show in the last game against Stanford, and there were concerns about, well, maybe has he had a step back in health or anything like that. The fact that he was out there for as much as he was is certainly an encouraging sign because Notre Dame really needs him in the passing game. They just have not had a lot of production out of the tight ends throughout most of the year, although Eli Raridan did have a nice catch on third down in this one. So important for Mitchell Evans to getting back to full health, and it was a well-balanced attack. They finished with 217 total passing yards, 168 rushing yards against a defense that had been really good against the run so far this season. And I totally understand it is fair to want more from this offense. I did think they got a little complacent in the second half. They weren't really explosive. They only had 3 passing plays of over 15 yards and 6 rushes for over 10 yards. So they need to get better for sure. But what they showed on those 3 touchdown drives in the middle part of the game shows you what this offense can be. This offense can be really good. When they're clicking like that, they have a bunch of different weapons they can throw at you. So that was really encouraging, but they just have to be a little bit more consistent. They cannot afford to have those throwaway drives, especially going up against Navy this upcoming week when time of possession is going to be really limited. So up and down day for the offense, but overall, I think there were some exciting things there that they can build upon going forward. That's the story of the day on offense. Meanwhile, the defense just continues to dominate no matter who is out there, and they shut down the Yellow Jackets offense after a brief hiccup in the first quarter. More on that right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after a night out. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. I come to you again and remind you to please not take this defense for granted. I know I probably sound like a broken record by now, but what this defense is doing is so impressive. They just lost arguably their best player on that side of the ball this week in cornerback Benjamin Morrison for the rest of the season. He is the third starter to go down for the year on that side of the ball. All 3 of those guys are critical. First was Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore, and now Benjamin Morrison. And they did not skip a beat despite the fact that they started a true freshman out there at cornerback in just his second career start. And sure, they were going up against Georgia Tech's backup quarterback, Zach Pyron, but he's older and he looked capable early on. I think he started off 9 for 9 in this game, so credit to him, but this defense put an end to that real quick, and they beat him up the whole night. This defense is fast, they are physical, and they are relentless. It felt like Georgia Tech players were dropping like flies in this one because this defense is violent. Like they are going to hit you, and they are going to hit you until the echo of the whistle. And Notre Dame's defense held them to just 333 total yards, including 64 rush yards. And this was one of the better rushing offenses in the country going into this game. They also forced 2 turnovers, including a pick 6 from Adon Schuler that basically iced the game late. And they really just followed the same script that they have all season long. They allow the other team to score early on using their 15-play script, their 15 best plays. Then Al Golden sees it, he adjusts his scheme, and then he basically just puts an end to their day. Sure, would it be great if they could avoid giving up an early touchdown every single week? Sure. But if that's the only TD that they're giving up in the game, then I'm cool with it. Like, I'll take it, right? This is just the second time this season that Notre Dame's defense gave up multiple touchdowns in a game. Louisville scored 3 in their matchup, but 2 of those touchdowns were basically gift wrapped to them because Devin Ford fumbled the opening kickoff and Jadarian Price fumbled the ball, both of which happened in the shadow of their own goalpost. So even in this game, like, Georgia Tech's last touchdown was a garbage time touchdown at the end there. So I don't even really count that. So they're basically only giving up one legitimate touchdown drive a game to the opposing starters. And I feel like this is such an outstanding group, and they were elite in all 3 levels on Saturday. Here's a couple players who stood out to me. First of all, Drake Bowen. Have yourself a game. That was the best game of his career so far. He led the team with 9 tackles. He had 5 solo. He had a quarterback hurry and 6 stops, according to Pro Football Focus. And I texted this in one of my many group chats about Notre Dame football. Drake Bowen is everywhere. He was flying all around the field, and I knew that he was athletic, but I think he showed a different level of athleticism in this game, so he was outstanding. Jack Kaiser had one of his best games of the year so far. He had 5 tackles, but something interesting to note about Jack Kaiser in this one. Remember going into the season, we thought that Notre Dame's defense would never be able to take Jack Kaiser off the field because not only was he their best linebacker, and I still believe that he is, but he was sort of the coach on the field for the whole defense. He played half the snaps in this one. 34 snaps compared to Leonard Moore, who played 68. Drake Bowen played 31 snaps. KVA had 28, and Jane Osbury had 30. Meanwhile, Jalen Seed had 19. So this isn't like Jack Kaiser's on the field all the time. Notre Dame's willing to play their young linebackers a lot, and they are taking snaps away from Jack Kaiser. And on one hand, Jack Kaiser gets to be a little bit more rested. We know that he's been dealing with some injuries this year, missed the bulk of the Louisville game. But I think that tells you just how good these young linebackers are, and the fact that the coaching staff trusts these guys that much already at this point in the season tells you a lot about this group. It's going to be a little bit different going up against a team like Navy because a lot of these young guys have not seen the triple option before, but Jack Kaiser certainly has. So I'm going to be interested to see how they adjust those snap counts this weekend. But I thought that was telling, and Jack Kaiser still played really good, but I think what the linebacking core as a whole is doing is really impressive. And then you got Leonard Moore, who led the team in snaps in just his second career start, and he was terrific. He had 7 total tackles. He had a tackle for loss. He had 2 passes deflected. They targeted him 9 times, and he did allow 1 big play of 60 yards, but a lot of those yards came after the catch, and Xavier Watts could have tackled them there. So I don't really fault Leonard Moore that much. I just think that what he is doing as a true freshman is so impressive. And I remember Benjamin Morrison said during preseason camp that he believes that Leonard Moore is going to have a better career than him. I still think that's a stretch to say, but the drop-off from Benjamin Morrison to Leonard Moore, at least in this one, was not nearly as significant as I thought it could be. Now, again, it's Georgia Tech. They don't have the best receivers in the world, and we'll see how he'd fare going up against, a really elite receiver, because we saw Benjamin Morrison basically shut down Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. I don't think Leonard Moore is ready to do that, but the fact that he's as good as he is this early on in his career is really, really encouraging. Xavier Watts, he continues to improve, man, and seems impossible considering he won the Nagurski Award for Defensive Player of the Year last year, but came back, said he had a lot to improve upon. He had another really good game in this one, 4 tackles, a pass breakup, and a key interception that basically bailed out Marcus Freeman because they went for it on that 4th down there. I really did not understand that call. Notre Dame was up 2 touchdowns at that point in time, and they basically gifted Georgia Tech a really good field position. I'm thinking, why not just punt it here? Because Notre Dame's defense had been shutting them down all game. But it didn't really matter because Xavier Watts immediately got an interception and gave the ball right back to the Notre Dame offense. Riley Mills had his best game of the season. He had 3 tackles, including 2 sacks, and was unblockable at certain points. Howard Cross was really good in this one as well, although it should be noted that he was dealing with some sort of an injury. Looked like his shoulder was bothering him in some way, looked frustrated, went into the medical tent. So going to be interesting to hear what Marcus Freeman has to say about Howard Cross's health status on Monday in his press conference, because Notre Dame absolutely needs him against Navy. So really good performance by the defensive line. Bryce Young continues to generate separation from him and R.J. Oben. R.J. Oben did get the start in this one, but Bryce Young played 37 snaps compared to Oben's 23. I think we're getting to the point where Bryce Young is going to just take over that starting spot going forward. Adon Schuler, pick 6. He basically just had the ball thrown right to him, but hey, that's a touchdown, man. And anytime you get a defensive touchdown, that's really exciting. And I thought Jordan Clark had another really good game as well. He did drop a pick 6, though, And that was a pick six if he was able to corral it. The ball hit him right in the hands, and it looked like he was about to tuck it and then just dropped the ball. Still, he gets credited with the pass breakup. They targeted him 4 times, and he allowed just 1 reception for 6 yards. So there are so many different guys that I want to spotlight on this defense, but that just shows you how deep and talented this group is. And I understand that Haynes King is a big part of the rushing game, obviously, but Jamal Haynes is a really good running back for Georgia Tech, and this Notre Dame defense held him to 15 rushing yards on 8 carries. That is really, really good, and they held Tech to 4 of 14 on third downs, and they kept him out of the end zone when they got close. And overall, this is just another really stellar performance by this group led by Al Golden, and it is what we've come to expect. I've said all year, do not take this group for granted, because as much as the offensive struggles have sort of been like the main focus about this team, and it's a big reason why they lost to Northern Illinois, but the fact that this defense continues to go out there and dominate their opponent every single week. They don't have a letdown performance, right? Defense travels, and it traveled again in this one, and it doesn't matter who's out there. They're losing starters, but then they just plug and play, and they continue to dominate, and they have a really tough task coming up this weekend against Navy, but I just think that the consistency from this group on a week-to-week basis, because like I said in the first segment, the offense showed really great signs. They're just not consistent. This defense is so consistent, and it's a big reason why this team has any chance of making the college football playoff this year. So really impressed with what I saw from the defense, and at this point, I guess the only surprising thing would be if they didn't go out there and dominate. All right, coming up next, we got to talk about special teams, because I thought it would have an impact. I did not think it would have just as big of an impact as it ultimately did on Saturday. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And there are so many great sporting events going on right now. Just think about it. You've got college football and NFL in full swing. The MLB playoffs are still going on. We get the World Series coming up, and they have been electric. Plus, you've got the NHL and the NBA starting up. So get off your couch and get to the game with Gametime. My favorite thing about the app, though, is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. So going into the game, I felt like special teams would be an important factor in the outcome of this game, and I mentioned in the preview that it would ultimately come down to which unit made the least amount of egregious mistakes, because both units had been prone to making those throughout the year. Well, Georgia Tech certainly kept that up with their botch snap on a field goal right before the half, and they allowed Notre Dame's Bryce Young to block a field goal. But Notre Dame had mistakes of their own as well, as Zach Yoka missed a 46-yarder, although I'm not going to really hold that against him too much because he is the backup kicker. Mitch Jeter missed another game with his groin injury. But what I did not expect was for Notre Dame to completely empty the bag of tricks on special teams going up against Georgia Tech when they had a 2-touchdown lead. First, they ran the fake punt, which was a double reverse pass, essentially, to Jeremiah Love. It was a great design, but that was nearly blown up right as Jeremiah Love was getting the pitch. But fortunately, Gabe Rubio had a nice block on the play. I thought they might get flagged, but fortunately, they did not. Then later on, Notre Dame faked a field goal with Tyler Buckner as the holder. And at first, I did not think it was designed. It looked like it was a fire drill, and then Buckner just rolled out right. But then I realized, wait, that's Tyler Buckner in there on the hold, so clearly it was designed because it was not Chris Salerno. Good for Tyler Buckner, man. He had to fight for that first down, but glad he got to make a play for this team. But the question I have is, why would you do all of this now? Like, why would you put all of this tape out there in a game when you were in full control? Like, I like the aggression, and sure, these plays worked, but was it necessary? I just don't think so, and now teams are going to be prepared for that down the road. Like, they ran the fake field goal up 24-7 with 4 minutes to go. And I know that there was a Georgia Tech reporter out there that said Marcus Freeman was trying to run up the score and literally called him a piece of shit. And I don't agree with that at all. But I just don't know why you would waste these types of plays on those moments. And Freeman was asked about it afterward, and he said that they were aggressive on the fake field goal because Georgia Tech had shown that they were really aggressive, so they were like, okay, well, we can counter that aggression with aggression, and they felt they could execute it, and it worked. But I just think you save that for a rainy day. You didn't need to waste that in a game when you were already up 17 and there's really no chance of Georgia Tech coming back. Same with the fake punt. I love the design. I love giving the ball to Jeremiah Love. And it was funny how that worked out because going into the game, I was texting friend of the program, Greg Flamung from Irish Sports Daily, like, have you heard anything about Jeremiah Love's health? Because there are all these different questions out there. And then he texted me, well, he's on punt coverage, so I'm guessing he's good. And then I was thinking, is he normally on punt coverage? That was in the first quarter of the game. Then later on, you see, oh, that's why Jeremiah Love was out there in coverage so that they could run that fake to him. And like I said, I really like the design, and maybe they have some more plays like that in their bag, but I just felt like they could have used that later on in a game where the outcome was in doubt. They were going up against one of the better teams, or they just really needed a spark or something like that. Now, I just think that teams are going to be ready for that. They're going to be prepared, and maybe Notre Dame has different counters, but I just didn't think it was necessary at that point in time. But I guess the one positive here is that most of the talk about special teams this year has been really negative. Like, they have had a lot of mistakes. I mean, the Miami game was abysmal, right, on that side of the ball. So I'm glad that I'm talking about special teams in a way that they helped the team win in this one. I mean, sure, James Rundell has still been a little bit inconsistent, but the fact that they were actually making plays in this phase of the game is a net positive. So that is good, but I just didn't love it. And that's me. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you really like the aggression. I do like the fact that Marcus Freeman is willing to be so aggressive in special teams. We know that it's a big priority for him. So I like that, but I just didn't think it was necessary in this game. And it wasn't like a situation where you could complain and be like, oh, wow, Notre Dame needs special teams to beat Georgia Tech. That wasn't the case. They didn't need it all. That's why I have my questions about it. But it was interesting. Notre Dame really emptied the bag here in this one. And it's going to be interesting to see how teams start to play them going forward. Are they going to be a lot more conservative? Are they going to be looking for all these different fakes? Like I said, maybe Notre Dame has more tricks in the bag. We are going to have to see. But as we wrap things up here, I look at this game and I feel like it was boring, but sometimes boring is good. And under Marcus Freeman, there have been a lot of games that were not boring for all the wrong reasons, where they play down to their opponent or they lose to Northern Illinois, they lose to Stanford, they lose to Marshall. And this game could have been a trap game because Notre Dame looked really good against Stanford. You've got this Navy game coming up who's going to be a ranked opponent. And Georgia Tech really was going to go all out in this one to try to get the win. Now, their injuries certainly hurt their chances, but they could have definitely played spoiler in this one and looked like they had a chance there early on. But Notre Dame stayed disciplined. They controlled this game, and they should go 11-1. I don't know if they will, but they have proven they are more than good enough to do so. They are going to be favored in every game left on the schedule. I thought USC could be a tricky game, especially once Benjamin Morrison got hurt, but then they just lost to Maryland this past weekend. So they're a train wreck over here on the West Coast at USC, but this is the type of win to me that shows progress for Marcus Freeman because he was able to get his team up and ready to go. They're playing in a sleepy NFL stadium. I mean, Mercedes-Benz sounds like a great place to watch a game, but there weren't a ton of fans in this one. It was not the best turnout. They also wore the white pants, which I hated. I thought it was dumb. It doesn't even look good. I like the white pants with the green jersey because I just thought the green jersey on the green pants was a little bit too much, but like you have one of the best uniforms in college football. Why mess with it? And I'm not even like old man yelling at a cloud like Notre Dame needs to respect their tradition and wear the same uniform every single week. Like I'm not even saying that. But if you're going to mess with the uniform combination, at least have a good one. And that was not good. Like the blue on white, I just didn't like it. You've got gold in your color scheme. Just wear gold. Why do we have to complicate this? So anyway, they're in Atlanta. It's like a home game, but it's not a home game. There's a lot of Georgia Tech fans in the crowd. There's a lot of empty seats in the crowd, but they still showed up. They were ready to go. I thought they won in all three phases. There were some things that got you really excited, especially on offense. I mean, the defense, the domination is what we've come to expect here, but it's not going to be the most memorable game, but it's still important because Notre Dame avoided the dreaded letdown and they looked good, and sometimes boring is good. I appreciated a boring game on Saturday, especially because I've been watching the MLB playoffs, and my Cleveland Guardians unfortunately fell to the New York Yankees every single game. Felt like a heart attack. So I was going into this Notre Dame game thinking, man, I really could use a boring win. Like if Notre Dame could just dominate this game from beginning to end and I'm not stressing out throughout this game, that's going to be better for me, selfishly. Unfortunately, Notre Dame did their job. The Guardians did not. So disappointing Saturday night for me, but I'm really happy with this win for Notre Dame. Like I said, I feel like I've seen this game 1,000 times, and you know what? I'll watch it 1,000 more if Notre Dame keeps winning like that. My hunch is that this upcoming game against Navy is going to be anything but boring. So the Irish really need to lock in after this one and get ready to win that game and finish the season out 11-1. And I don't know if you saw this on the broadcast, but according to ESPN's playoff predictor, Notre Dame now has a 63% chance of making the playoff. They only showed it 35 times during the broadcast. I don't know why, but hey, now we know, right? All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back on Tuesday morning with Luke Smith, as we always do, to give our final thoughts on the win over Georgia Tech by breaking down 3 things that we liked and didn't like from this one. And then we will turn the page to Navy for the rest of this week. Remember, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, and I'll see you on Tuesday.